Details are emerging of a daring IDF commando operation in Syria, 2,000 kilometers from the Israeli territory, to destroy an Iranian missile production facility. At the same time, Israel is pulling out a surprising trump card against the Houthis in Yemen, and the Iranian regime is stunned that Israel can force a decision on them without even going to war. Meanwhile, a month after the Lebanese border ceasefire agreement, the IDF continues operational activity against Hezbollah infrastructure, while the terror organization is trying to gut the agreement of its content and is considering forming a new militia operating under a different name similar to the Iraqi model. In the Gaza Strip, the IDF's decision to move against Hamas terrorists who had set up their last military headquarters in the Kamal Adwan hospital is drawing attention, but the fall of the last bastion of Hamas's power in the city also means the operation is at its end. Meanwhile, the negotiations to reach a deal that will see Israeli hostages finally released goes on, with the optimism that we had last week rapidly fading. The negotiating teams say that there is still a chance for a deal, but we are dependent on one man, Mohammed Sinwar. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 451 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq, all of which are operating under the auspices of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, I want to invite you to please hit that subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth of what's happening in Israel and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Today's video is sponsored by MEMRI. This is an important research institute that follows mainly, but not only, Arab media reports in order to give a better picture of what's going on in our neighborhood, in this region. I'll explain more about them later on, but first, the news. We start with another made-for-Hollywood story about a daring Israeli commando raid, which is just now coming to light, although the incident took place in September. The target of the commandos was the so-called Scientific Studies and Research Center of the Syrian defense industry and on an underground missile production facility of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps near the city of Masyaf in Syria. For over the decade, Israel's defense establishment has been familiar with the Scientific Studies and Research Center, SIRS, which is a generic sounding name for a project with an evil purpose, including the production of chemical weapons. After Israel identified that the Iranians had transferred components for a precision missile project into the facility, operational plans were drawn up for ground raids. The operation was carried out about 200 kilometers from the Israeli territory and included a daring raid by the Israeli Special Forces, who repelled from helicopters and seized materials from the missile facility. According to foreign reports, Iranian missile scientists were also taken for questioning. Syria's state-run news agency, SANA, reported that 18 people were killed and dozens more were wounded in the incident. And elsewhere, the Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is a group which was part of the opposition to the Assad regime, reported that the strikes hit an area housing a scientific research institute working on developing precision missiles. Details of this raid are just beginning to emerge, and we will keep you informed of developments going forward. More recently in Syria, Turkey has been flexing its muscles. Reports have emerged that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan approached Israel via his communication channels in recent days, asking the IDF and the security agencies to coordinate their activities in Syria with Turkey. This request is assessed to be part of the ongoing effort by Turkey to fill the security vacuum left behind by departing Russian forces and is being considered in Jerusalem. Although Turkey has been unfriendly towards Israel in recent years, Turkish management of Syria will probably be better for Israel than Russian management was, to say nothing of Iranian management. However, it is important to remember that a coordination mechanism existed between the IDF and the Russians for several years, and it worked reasonably well. This mechanism allowed Israel to carry out the previously mentioned commando raid and many other important operations without interference from the Russians. As a side note, it was also noticed in Iran that the Russians, who are supposed to be Tehran's ally, would allow the Israelis to attack their interest in Syria, and this was very irritating to the Iranians. But for now, the Israeli defense establishment has decided not to pursue a similar arrangement with Turkey, waiting to see how things play out before making any commitments. The situation in Syria is very unsettling, and things can change here very quickly. For instance, in recent days, the Israeli Air Force destroyed a tank force that the rebels had seized and held near the border with Israel in the Golan region. These were tanks that the rebels got their hands on after Assad's army withdrew and Israel feared they might be turned against the state of Israel, so the decision was made to destroy them before that could happen. This is part of a broader policy in Israel against allowing any potentially hostile party in Syria to rearm itself with strategic weapons. This is part of an ongoing discussion between the new regime in Damascus that is led by former rebel leader Abu Muhammad al-Julani. Turkey and Qatar are also taking part in these discussions, and Israel is monitoring the situation very closely. Israel knows that Syria is facing a terrible humanitarian crisis and is desperately in need of money and support for stabilizing the economy and rebuilding infrastructure. Israel has an interest in seeing its neighbor to the northeast be rebuilt in a way that will lead to lasting stability and not allow it to turn into Afghanistan-style failed state ruled by warlords and influenced by hostile powers. What we are seeing now is that most of the money and weapons being sent into Syria are coming from powers that are unfriendly, if not hostile, for Israel, and this is very alarming. The best option from Israel's perspective is that the Americans manage this situation and form some kind of positive relationship with the regime that is led by al-Julani. In the meantime, we are taking no chances, and the IDF is setting up a strong line of defensive positions in the Golan Heights. This includes rendering assistance to the residents of Syria in these villages in order to form an alliance or a cooperation in order for this to work. Here at TV in Israel, we will continue to bring you the most up-to-date news on what's happening in Israel, and we ask you to continue helping us by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. Once again, if you have not yet clicked on that subscribe button, please do so, and it really helps us get the truth out to more people. According to our analytic data, almost 60% of our regular viewers are not subscribers yet to this channel. So if you want to help us, please subscribe and we can reach more people with the truth. Now back to the news and switching our focus to events in Lebanon. A month after signing the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah under American mediation, the situation on the northern border is far from stable. An analysis of the state of affairs on the ground reveals a complicated picture indicating a significant gap between the understandings and the practical realities. The IDF continues operating in Lebanon inside the territory of Lebanon, conducting extensive searches for infrastructure such as tunnels and ammunition depots alongside aerial strikes against Hezbollah military movements. On the Lebanese side, deployment of the Lebanese army in areas south of the Litani is limited due to the shortage of manpower, budgetary issues, and an inability to act independently against Hezbollah. In plain language, the Lebanese National Army is not a serious military force, despite decades of investments by the United States and France. Personally, I have no doubt that there are brave men in that army who are doing their best, but they simply don't have the tools they need to do the job that they've been assigned to do. At the moment, there are 4 strategic points where the IDF is expected to remain, with the very presence across the border allowing, if necessary, for raids on additional targets inside Lebanon. Meanwhile, political sources estimate that Hezbollah has begun to strip the agreement of its substance by denying commitment related to weaponry, depots, and military infrastructure. This is because they are afraid that full implementation of the agreement could weaken its influence over the Lebanese state and spark public debate about the necessity of its weapons. In fact, Israeli intelligence sources have revealed that Hezbollah is considering forming a new militia that would operate under a different name, similar to the model of Katib Hezbollah in Iraq. This new militia could attack IDF forces in South Lebanon under the guise of resistance to occupation without it being directly attributed to Hezbollah. And meanwhile, most residents of northern Israel communities still fear returning to their homes despite the ceasefire. Because of this, Israeli security officials are seriously considering leaving IDF forces in Lebanese territory to create a security zone similar to the one that the IDF maintained in the area from 1985 to 2000. This would require coordination with the Americans, meaning both the current administration and especially the incoming Trump administration, which is set to take office about a week before the withdrawal date per the ceasefire agreement. A political official summed up Israel's position by declaring that we won't be suckers for Hezbollah and the Lebanese army. If the other side does not implement the agreement as committed, we also won't implement our part. We will not abandon southern Lebanon to Hezbollah once again. On that note, IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi conducted an assessment on Sunday in southern Lebanon with senior military figures, including the Northern Command Chief Major General Ori Gordin. And during the assessment, he discussed the IDF's military achievements against Hezbollah and addressed future challenges. Halevi emphasized that the military victory against Hezbollah is clear and tangible, but to ensure true stability in the region, there is a need to create an active and thriving civil environment. This is the only way that a military victory can be turned into a long-term strategic achievement. Right now, the situation is very fragile, with lingering tensions on both sides of the border. A single rocket launched from Hezbollah into Israel could reignite the conflict. The international community, led by the United States, France, and Saudi Arabia, is attempting to stabilize Lebanon's economy and political situation, but so far without significant successes. As you can see, here at TB in Israel, we never take our eyes off what's happening every day and everywhere. We keep tracking in our shows what's happening in the Arab world as well as in Iran and Turkey, and how it's affecting Israel and the rest of the world. We always try to stay on top of these issues so we can give our viewers, you, the most updated news. In order to understand what our enemies are talking and thinking about, we have to be able to see things through their eyes. Memory is a research institute doing exactly that. The researchers are analyzing constantly and monitoring media portals in the Arab world as well as Russia, China, and even inside communities in the United States, bridging the language gap and alerting about any threat. They also monitor extremist mosques and Islamic organizations throughout social media. It is crucial that legislators and governments, as well as the general public, will stay current with this information. In many cases, the speakers they follow are the main influencers on hate crimes against Christians and Jews. Access to this information should be crucial to you and everyone you know. In order for them to be able to keep uncovering the truth, they need your help. So please visit their website at www.supportmemory.org. They are a non-profit organization, and all donations to them are tax deductible. Your donation is very important so they can continue with this mission, and you, our viewers, can consider yourself part of the battle for a better world. Go see the work they are doing and join this fight. Thank you, and let's get back to the news. Fighting in the Gaza Strip against the Hamas terrorist organization has intensified in recent days, creating pressure on Hamas's last remaining positions. For Division 162, which has been leading the offensive in northern Gaza for the past 3 months, Kamal Adwan Hospital was the main last Hamas base in Jabalia. Its fall this past weekend marks a conclusive of the operation in the city, but there are still some mopping up operations that will be needed. The story about the IDF raid on the terrorist headquarters inside this hospital is a fascinating case study in how a modern army must operate against hostile terrorist forces who are embedded inside civilian infrastructure. The raid began about a week ago with an aerial reconnaissance on the facility and the surrounding area using drones. Early Friday morning, Golani fighters from the Shimshon Battalion and their armored counterparts from the 401st Brigade spotted 2 squads of terrorists who tried to flee the hospital when the forces arrived, surrounding the compound within an hour. These terror squads were eliminated from the air, and the soldier discovered that most of the civilian buildings around the hospital contained fighting positions, booby traps, and hundreds of various weapons set up so that the terrorists would come out innocent from the hospital to use buildings and gear up to arm themselves against the IDF forces. During the fighting on these outskirts of the hospital, the soldiers neutralized 19 terrorists without any casualties amongst the troops of the IDF. Hamas had prepared well to defend itself and its stronghold in the hospital, but the IDF forces launched a swift, covert raid and in less than an hour surrounded the entire compound, preventing any terrorists from escaping. As they moved in, the IDF forces found only a small amount of weapons inside the hospital itself, but they found a very large number of terrorists, the largest scope, in fact, found in one location in the Gaza Strip, and arrested all of them at once. As part of the operation, troops from the brigade carried out a safe evacuation of civilians from the hospital area, and some Hamas terrorists tried to hide among these civilians to try and escape. Some even put fake bandages so that they appear to be wounded and in need of further medical attention at other hospitals where the civilians were being moved to. According to the IDF, this is one of the largest single-site terrorist arrest operation that was carried out since the start of the war. 240 terrorists were captured, including 15 individuals who are known to have taken part in Hamas's surprise assault on Israel on October 7th of last year. While they were rounding up all of these terrorists inside the hospital, the IDF troops were attacked by other terrorist squads on the outskirts of the compound. But these attacks were countered, and the terrorists were eliminated without any casualties to the Israeli forces. Prior to launching this operation, many steps were taken to minimize civilian casualties, and in recent weeks, 350 patients, escorts, and staff members were evacuated in coordination with the Gaza District Coordination and Liaison Office under the coordination of the government activities in the territories called COGAT. At the same time, the IDF brought tens of thousands of liters of fuel and hundreds of kilograms of food and medical equipment into the hospital. During the operation itself, coordinated by the Gaza DCL with the health authorities, another 95 patients, escorts, and staff members were evacuated to the Indonesian hospital along with 5,000 liters of fuel, 2 generators, and medical equipment to maintain vital systems and operate the Indonesian hospital. At the same time, it was possible to safely evacuate hundreds of civilians from the area for their safety through orderly routes. Evacuating Kamal Adwan Hospital reflects a scenario repeated in virtually every medical center in the Gaza Strip that the terror groups have taken over for combat and for hiding behind human shields. Accordingly, yesterday the IDF spokesperson's unit announced that the Air Force struck terrorists operating inside the Wafa hospital in Gaza City. Elsewhere, the Jabalia refugee camp is a very strong Hamas bastion, and the IDF knew there are thousands of operatives there. So far, around 2,200 terrorists have been eliminated there, and another 1,200 have been captured. Many of these actually surrendered, telling their interrogators that they know the fight is lost and it's pointless to continue fighting. This greatly increases the level of security in the adjacent area and also provides an incentive for more Hamas fighters to surrender. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you on all these developments in the Gaza Strip. Before we move on to our final segment, I want to once again invite you to visit our website, tbnisrael.com, to get updates in between the videos. And also, if you want to support our work, you can click that donate button on YouTube or visit our website and give your donation. We conclude with an update on negotiations for a deal that will see Israel's remaining hostages released from captivity in Gaza. Israeli officials issued a statement on Sunday evening that negotiations continue all the time, despite reports that they are stuck. Everyone is aware of the date that the Trump administration will return to the White House on January 20th, 2025, and this is seen as a deadline by which the hostages must be returned. However, the officials noted that there is one man standing in the way of an agreement at this point, and that is Muhammad Sinwar, the brother of late Yahya Sinwar, who has assumed the leadership of what's left of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. He added, maybe there will be no deal at all. Hamas is willing to make a deal, but on its terms. And meanwhile, senior Hamas official Osama Hadmada accused Israel of undermining the hostage negotiation process. He told the terror group's Al-Aqsa channel that Israel keeps reversing what was agreed. According to him, Jerusalem is not willing to fully withdraw from the Gaza Strip and stop the war. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to provide updates on every development. So guys, please keep spreading the truth, and most importantly, please subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. It really helps us to reach more people with what's going on in this region. And why? So that we can unite in prayer for all those innocent civilians that are affected by these terrorist organizations, for the state of Israel to survive in this hostile region, and for God to reign. I want to conclude by paying final respects to the heroes of Israel who fell in the defense of our country. Sergeant First Class Yuval Shaim, 22 years of age, from Jerusalem, a tank fighter in the 9th Battalion, 401 Brigade, who fell on Sunday during a Givati operation in Jabalia in the northern Gaza Strip. Please continue praying for Israel. Pray for the well-being of our IDF soldiers wherever they are, if they're fighting in Syria, Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, or Judea and Samaria. And pray for the swift and safe return of our hostages from Gaza who are held by the terrible Hamas terrorists for so long, I just can't imagine that. So that you can attach a name and know a little bit about the personal lives of that hostage, I'm going to share a little bit today about Liri Elbag. 19 years of age, she's an Israeli soldier who was abducted by Hamas terrorists on October 7, 2023, during an attack on the Nahal Oz military base near the Gaza border. At 18, she was serving as an observant soldier after being positioned there just 2 days prior. Her last communication with her mother, Shira, was at 6:30 a.m. on the day of the attack, during which she mentioned seeking shelter from rocket fire. Later, her family identified her in a video released by Hamas confirming her abduction. Reports indicate that Liri and other female hostages were forced to perform household chores under harsh conditions, and after approximately 40 days, they were moved to underground tunnels with limited access to food, water, and basic hygiene facilities. So please keep these hostages in prayer. And I will ask you to pray for our Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is in the hospital right now recovering from a surgery he needed to have. And also, please pray for all your leaders to make wise and godly decisions in every situation that they need to encounter. The most important thing that you can do in all this very confusing and hard situation is to keep praying, because God has all the answers. So let's trust in Him. Let's have an amazing faith in our God, and never forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And together, we will win this war.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.